areas across the globe where populations have been wiped out because of plagues, right? Historically, you know this to be the case, like the Black Plague and other plagues in Europe, where millions of people were dying at a time. And you know as well, there's been eras in the history of the church, in particular geographical regions on the earth, when there have been wars, where millions of people have been wiped out. Does that mean that God wasn't merciful during that time? No, obviously he was. But we, my friends, we, you, me, in these times right now, I believe that we are blessed to such a degree because of this message. God saved this message and the promises attached with it for you and your messed up families and your funky children and your unfaithful spouse and all that goes with that. Because God knew that there would never be a more messed up time than our time. We live in crazy times, and you know this. If I asked you for a hand count of how many of you, as I said yesterday, got issues, baggage in your family or in your own life or in a situation that you know, every one of you would raise your hand. This is a messed up times that we live in right now. And as that same Pope would say, you know, in many instances, it's a culture of death out there with the killing of children, with all the wars that are going on. Nowadays, people are using their body as an instrument of war, as something that you can blow up and kill other people in the name of God. It's crazy what's going on in the world nowadays, globally, not just geographically. At different eras in the history of the church, there was a plague here, but not over here. And there was a war here, but not over here. But now, the whole world has a spiritual plague, a spiritual deluge, a flood. God said he would never destroy the world with a flood again, right? It's in the scriptures. Not a physical flood. But there's a spiritual flood going on, right? Read about it in Revelation. Satan, out of his mouth, is pouring a fountain to drown God's children. It's a fountain of filth and perversion and sickness. And we're in it. It's everywhere. And yet God has given to us the new ark of salvation to ride above it and to not drown. The one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church, the ark of salvation for our times. And there's a new Noah who wants us to get in that boat, and that's Jesus Christ. And he's given to us in our times a particular message for our messed up situation so that we can find hope and not despair. And not despair. So let me lead you through this, because a lot of people don't know this. They don't know the history of it. And this is part of what makes this particular man that the church is going to beatify so amazing. And what makes the God that we love and adore even more amazing on a different level. God Almighty, who is so in love with you that he gave during your lifetime one of the greatest men to ever walk this earth with a message for you, with promises that were approved by his hand for you, because he was your papa, your dad spiritually, wanting you to not despair and not give up hope, but trust and have confidence in God Almighty. In the life of John Paul II, before he was the Pope, he was the Cardinal Archbishop of Krakow in Poland. And as a young man, even before that, as a young man, he used to work at a rock quarry right next to a convent where a sister lived that he had no idea at the time what was going on. Well, this sister was Faustina, right? And he had heard about her. They had never met. They never met in life. But he had heard about her. And as he went through his life, and you know all about his life, and what he went through as a young man, and the persecutions, and how he had to live in many instances clandestinely, meaning in secret from the governmental regimes and the authorities because of the tumultuous times that he grew up in, and then becoming a priest, and then by the divine plan of God, becoming a bishop, becoming the Cardinal Archbishop in Krakow. And during that time of having that office, that great office of being the Cardinal Archbishop in Krakow, it was during that time that the diary of St. Faustina was actually banned. Did you know about that? Okay, I'm glad that you do, because a lot of people don't. They didn't know about this. A lot of people actually don't know. Let me back up and actually say this. Did you know that the diary that you have, if you have one, you know, the big fat red book that looks intimidating when you first get it, right? I remember the first time somebody gave me one, I was like, gee, thanks. It was like, I got to read this phone book. You know, it's like that thick, you know? Actually, there's a new version out. It's the same content, but it's in a little one. It's like a little Gideon's Bible version. You know, it's a small little one. Same thing. Satan actually tricked Faustina to burn the first version of it. Did you know about that? Yeah, Satan appeared to Faustina after she had started writing the diary. Satan appeared to her as Jesus and said to her, my daughter, basically forget it. Never mind writing this. It's of no use. Throw it away. Burn it. And she did. She threw it into the fire, and it was gone. And then when her confessor, her spiritual director, found out about it, he reprimanded her and said, that wasn't Jesus. And it wasn't. She took it to prayer, and the real Jesus came to her and said, my daughter, that was not me. Start writing it again. And therefore, when we start reading the beginning of the diary, you start reading it in retrospect. She starts talking about her childhood. That wasn't in the first edition. It's only because she burnt the first one that we're able to find out about her childhood, about when she was at that dance. If you remember, if you haven't read it, you need to read it to know what I'm talking about. Okay, very interesting what went down there. And then after her death, right before World War II, after that, when Cardinal Wojtyła was in Krakow, there was actually a faulty translation of her initial diary, which she had written down by hand in horrible grammar, because she didn't have much of an education at all, and so she didn't know where to put commas and punctuation and all the things of that nature, and it was kind of all over the place. Well, there was a particular sister who got a copy and was going to translate it into Italian, thinking this would be, good to do so that people can read it in Italian, but she wasn't authorized to do this. And she did it on her own, and it was a horrible translation because she just went at it in her own style. And then what happened was the Holy See, Rome, the Vatican, found out about this translation, got a copy of it in Italian, because it's Italy, and they read it, and they said to themselves, this is crazy. Because it sounded like there was some Polish sister who wanted devotion to her merciful heart, that she was asking for a feast day to her divine mercy. That's how bad the translation was. And so the Vatican actually shut it down and banned it. Back in the day, there was kind of a list of banned books that were forbidden to read because they were considered unorthodox. Well, this book was put on there in 1958. It was shut down. No further publications. No one was to read it. It was forbidden. It's in the church documents. You can find these things if you research it. 1958. Guess how long it was shut down for? 20 years, right? See, this divine mercy thing for you and me is still brand spanking new, right? It didn't come out right away, right after World War II. And then it was actually suppressed for 20 years. But then guess what happened? God, in his plan and in his love for you, sent a man named Karl Wojtyła to be the Cardinal Archbishop of that same place where her tomb is, St. Faustina. And during his time in that diocese, people were coming to him and saying, something's not right. We know that this sister was holy. You knew about her. You know something's not right. And he acknowledged that. And he's the one who was responsible for looking further into this. And so he began by, I want to say hiring, but that's not the word. He got a theologian who was on the International Theological Commission to research the life of St. Faustina, which meant he had to go to the source of the primary source, which was the diary, and unpack it in its original, not the translations, in its original. He was a Polish theologian who knew tons of different languages, and including ancient languages and theology. He was a brilliant man. And it took him 10 years. And a book written in French with tons of Italian and Latin and all the kind of things in it. And it's about that thick. No joke, okay? And he unpacked her life, the primary source, and he was skeptical at first because he was a deep theologian. He'd been trained in academic theology by Dominicans and so forth. He was brilliant. And he had his doubts because she was saying things like, God's greatest attribute is his mercy. These are profound theological statements. And talking about a new feast day, Divine Mercy Sunday, and all this. And he had his doubts. But as he went through, he realized this is a masterpiece. Along the same lines of great people like St. Teresa of Avila, St. Therese of Lisieux, and a whole bunch of other women saints that have just been absolutely brilliant in their simplicity. And so it took him 10 years, and by the end of it,